Hey, church. Hey, Jamie. Hey, Richard. Okay. So I'm up here because I'm going to be, hi, Ricky, introducing my husband. Yes. So I'm introducing my husband. So first, we had a bunch of messages from you guys on Veterans Day. We really appreciated that. So I wanted to introduce him by saying that what a privilege it's been to be in Jeff's life this entire time. For everybody who's like ever heard me talk about him, I usually like break down crying, and I'm just like, he's so great. So I'm not going to do that this time. I don't even like him anymore. Good. So. But yeah, every moment that I've spent as being a part of his life has been such a privilege. I served in the military with him. We started dating eventually. I married him, and we've grown a family together, and we have 2 beautiful daughters together. Love it. But I think the greatest thing that has happened is that he just took our friendship, and he was my original discipler in the military. He's going to talk a little bit about being a disciple in the military. But he took that and led me by the hand to God. And it took many years, and I now have someone else to lift up on that pedestal. And I am so blessed and so thankful to have had him to help me with that. And now I have God in my life, and I have you all in my life. So my other privilege this morning, besides all those, is to introduce him. He's going to be sharing a little bit about his life as a disciple in the military for today's sermon.
So it's also my privilege to announce my wife. Because as much as why we're here today, I mean, Jamie, as a younger, or not younger, but as a, like, I think it's different. Like, I hate to do the whole man-woman thing, but it's different for a woman in the military, because it's definitely a man's club. And she went in there, and she gave her all, and she came out a better and stronger person. I think she would have been a better, stronger person regardless, but, you know, I'll give the military a little bit of credit, but I'll give your parents a whole more credit than that. And so what we did was we brought some stuff up, and one of the things that I did is I wanted to show you Jamie's hat, and I also wanted to show you that, like, this leadership stuff that she had was strong in the military, but it continued when she came out, and even while she was in college at one of the universities recognized her leadership, and they're the ones that gave her this big plaque, which was a very prestigious military award. So give her a hand, please, for Veterans Day. All right, guys. Let me ask you guys a question. I need a show of hands here of everybody who's getting paid by the congregate, like a paid staff member. I need a show of hands. Okay, I don't see any, so this is going to be a union meeting. And I've handed out the union flyer, the agenda for what we're going to have. We have 3 points there. And so, you know, I am going to get to share about my life in the military, but specifically what I want to focus on is my life as a disciple in the military and how both of those came together, right? So you might have seen Enos wish us a happy Veterans Day on the messenger, and you may have seen me in my desert camis, and I may have looked like, oh, that's what I was doing? I was rapping? Okay. Well, you know what I was rapping about, right? Of course it was Jesus, right? So, I don't know. Can I do it a little bit? One verse? Okay. I will. See how cheesy this all is? It's all cheesy. All right. Just listen to the words. With the church on every corner, it may be easy to get confused. Not to mention each one has its own religious views. Adding to the confusion, what's really biblically true? A search of Jesus as a search of precious jewels, a mystery. So watch out for the clues, and to prove to be a good worker, you got to use the proper tools. Because with this Bible, you can't pick and choose. You need it all to have the good news. But for most, they don't got it straight. And as for you, I need you to enter through the narrow gate, because wide is the road and broad is the gate. The many choose to go, blindly follow. Why? I don't know. Only thanking God that he showed me the proper road, homie. So now that you know the road of truck and you choose the road, then you choose to lose. So I'm going to have you help me with this. Wait. You guys are going to clap, but you guys got to clap with yourselves. So we're going to make up a verse here, okay? It's really simple. Okay, it's like this. It's going to be only one faith, only one God, only one kingdom, and one Son of God. Only one faith, only one God, only one kingdom, and one Son of God. There's only one faith, only one God, only one kingdom, and one Son of God. Only one faith, only one God, only one kingdom, and one Son of God. All right, give yourselves a hand. There you go. All right, so this is like Cafe Unplugged. We had Christian getting down on the guitar. We had some cheesy Christian rap, which is always great, right? All right, so the title of my message: the Christian road will never be what you expect it to be. So half of our front row is gone to the cops retreat. And they're going there because they're training, because they hope to be the next man up. They hope to be the next level of leadership. But no matter how much training you put in, you never know what's going to happen. And all of us sitting here at this union event, we may be the ones that are called up. Because we never know what the Christian road is going to lead us to. We don't know what to expect. So I brought some books. I gave a couple of them out. I have a few more to give out. The guy that wrote this book, his name is Martin Bentley. He was a preacher, and he still is a preacher that I used to listen to, have a lot of respect for the sermons that he had. And one of the sermons he had, he started off like this. He said, if I'm on stage and somebody comes up and they assassinate me, who is going to be the next person to come up and take that stage? Now, that's what, metaphoric? It's just a thing to think about, right? What's the reality of that actually happening? Well, it did. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And actually, the reason that we will talk about it is because it wouldn't surprise me if it would happen again. And so this message that I'm going to give today isn't something that's going to be for tomorrow or forever. It's really just something that's in the background, because there will be a time, and we never know when we're going to be on that road where God is going to call us to grow. So we should always be ready. We should always have our eyes open, and we should always expect. Now, of course, we're always living as disciples, and we're always doing that stuff. So I have to kind of decipher between the two of what I am talking about. Okay, so let's do some Martin Luther King Jr. That's always great to get people started, right? So the internet says this: if you have not discovered something that you're willing to die for, then you are not fit to live. Did he say that? I don't know. I think the internet gives people credit for things, and then they attach somebody famous so that the quote will have more of a punch, right? Because I think I saw Mark Twain also said that. So, but what he did say, and we'll go into what he did say. So in 1968, in a sermon, he was 38 years old, he had this to say: you may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity will stand before you, and it'll call you to stand up for some great principle, for some great issue, for some great cause, and you may refuse because you are afraid. You refuse because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you'll lose your job, that you'll be criticized, that you'll lose popularity, that someone might stab you, somebody might shoot you, somebody might bomb your home, and you refuse to take a stand. Well, you might go on to live to be 90 years old, but you're just as dead at 38 as you will be at 90. The sensation of breath in your life is only but a belated sensation of an early death of your spirit. I could be done, right? That's a great sermon. I'm good. I'll just piggyback off of that, and don't expect anything great more from this sermon other than what was just quoted. Now, what he was saying was, you could be alive, but you can be dead. Somebody doesn't have to come and assassinate you to kill you. You're already dead if you're living in fear, so you don't physically have to die. You're already dead when you compromise what you stood for or if you don't even stand at all. In the movie Batman, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. You either make the decision to live for Christ or you're the villain. Batman symbolizes justice, noble cause. Martin Luther King Jr. symbolizes civil rights, noble cause. But today, I want us to stand only for God. No secondary causes. Only for God. And that's going to be the focal point of what I talk about today. And I hope I tug on your heart a little bit as we talk about what this means. So as you see, you guys have the paper. It'll be easy to follow along. We have 2 points. We're going to bounce it back and forth between each of them. The first point is if you're a disciple long enough, you will be called to be the next man up. If you're a disciple, God is the only cause and everything else is secondary. To the first point, if you're a disciple and you live long enough, you'll live long enough to see who the next man up is. I just mentioned Martin Bentley, and I said that he was speaking metaphorically, but may have actually been a reality. In 2001, church leaders would be convinced that it would be noble and necessary to change the way in which worship and the way that disciples should act amongst each other. And because it was noble and because it seemed necessary, these changes weren't necessarily challenged in the way that we did business. But as something became clear and as something seemed wrong in the way that people were being disciples or not being disciples, disciples at some point had to ask themselves, would they continue to comply with these new regulations that were coming from the pulpit, or would they return back to the gospel? I don't know if you guys watched the GNN stuff, but Martin Bentley was on that several episodes ago. So he has returned back to the church. And so he's our brother, and if you get a chance to listen to him, you know, I'm not trying to bring him down. I'm just saying he's the one that said it, so he's the one that I mentioned here. And the second point, if you're a disciple, God is the cause and everything else is secondary. People equate their causes, the things that they're passionate about, as noble, and so somehow they twist it and they think God is also about this, that he's also. So I'm passionate and noble about my cause, and I'm a disciple, and I'm passionate and noble about God, and they are the same. I am a noble person by having these causes and being a disciple, but if you think that, you are wrong. Let's turn to Luke 14, 26, 27. You don't even have to turn there because it's written on your paper, but you could turn there either way. If anyone comes after me and does not hate their father, their mother, their wife, their children, their brother, their sister, and yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. What cause is more important than your family? And yet, as disciples, the thing that should be priority is Jesus Christ. The other point, and whoever does not carry their cross cannot follow me and be my disciple. Now let's consider this mathematically. We got some cops out in California training, right? And unfortunately, sometimes cops die in the line of duty. And actually, our cops want to die in the line of duty. If you're a leader of Christ, there is no better cause than to die for Christ. But let's think about it mathematically. If our leaders die, well, somebody has to raise up and somebody has to step up. So again, if you walk long enough as a disciple, you will be called to rise up. And let's think about this particular service. We had Destiny up here. We had Christian up here. We had Christian up here. I mean, you're going to be oh, Sarah, I'm way so sorry. Thank you. I always forget one person, and then like halfway, I always forget. Anyway, thank you, Sarah. But a lot of different people have come up and stepped up. We're going to be called to step up. I want to tell you my story, but it became evident when I started telling the story to some people that I have to choose my words wisely because people get emotionally charged about things with the military, things in general. We got our social, emotional issues. We have our political issues. Our causes are such a high priority that sometimes it's hard for people to talk because I might offend your social or your political or your whatever issue you have going on. And I'm really not trying to do that. I'm trying to highlight what God has in store for you and God's purpose for each one of us. So if I was to write the verse, if anyone would come after Jesus and does not hate Democrats, does not hate Republicans, does not hate conservatives, does not hate liberals, and yes, even their own noble causes, such a person cannot be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Amen? You don't have to agree with that. I hate changing scripture up like that, and I feel a little sacrilegious about that, but you don't have to go. It's not that civil rights isn't important. It's just that it's not the same priority. Jesus is a higher priority. You might believe that Republicans are going to destroy the world, and they are. And you might believe the Democrats are going to destroy the world, and they are. And it's not our job to save the world, it's our job to save souls. In the Navy, we tell old stories, and we call these stories sea stories. So on Veterans Day, if you guys would allow me, and I guess you have to because I have the mic, I'm going to tell you a sea story. And again, this is my life as a disciple in the military. In 1994, oh my God, that was so long ago, I joined the Navy. What? I wasn't even born yet. What? I wasn't even born. I joined the Navy in 1984. And 4 years later, well, I wasn't patriotic, so I didn't join the Navy because I was patriotic. I was really aimless. I just needed a job, okay? But 4 years later, I would become a disciple. And 4 years later after that, I would be on the lines of a physical war. Several years after I had become a disciple and I was in the military, I received a phone call really early in the morning. It was my daughter's birthday, and so I thought maybe this phone call could have been about her birthday or it could have been about work. I really wasn't sure. And I don't remember who gave me the call, but the reason that I bring up the call is because I remember what it was about. It forced me to turn on the television. So I turned on the television, and there was smoke coming from the World Trade Center. And you know, people say they know exactly where they were at when President Kennedy got shot. I was in grade school when the Challenger blew up. All the kids were watching that on television. And here we were, something else being etched into our brain, another plane live on TV hitting a World Trade Center. Now, this is going to be a bad metaphor, but 9/11 is kind of like baptism in that it's a radical, life-changing event. 9/11 was tragic, but being born again is triumphant. It's a metaphor because it changes purpose. And I was in the military in peacetime, and now I was in the military and war was on the horizon. You were walking around aimlessly, not concerned about the spiritual war. Your life changed. You came out the water. Now the war is here, and the war is still on the horizon. Battle after battle. In 2001, the tower fell. In 2002, an early cold February morning, I was leaving my 3 young children in their bed, sleeping because I couldn't say goodbye to them again. My friend, he came and picked me up, and he drove me to the base, and he walked me down the pier, and he carried one of my sea bags. My friend was my discipler who was also in the military, so he had access and could walk me all the way up to this warship that was about to deploy me and hundreds of other people to the Middle East. And we were having our final quiet time on a cold February morning on a pier, early enough that it was still quiet because many Marines and soldiers would be on it later on. A few months later, I would be on a helicopter, and it would drop me off in the Middle East. I would be in a camp with about 40 what they call coalition forces, mostly Marines, Air Force, some Royal Navy, not Navy, but Royal officers. And so it was a group of different people that had come together to be part of what the military was asking them to do. And during my time, if you're a military person, you might know some of these things. And even if you're not a military person, you might know some of these things that happened while I was there. There was Jessica Lynch, which if you don't know, that's fine. Shock and awe, which I think most people know. And end of major combat operations in Iraq, which turned out not to be true. But I don't want to share about those things. I want to share what I did as a disciple in the desert. As a disciple in the desert, I did what every good disciple would do. I stole some Bibles. Now, the chaplain had some. They weren't being used. And I was out in the middle of the desert, and I didn't have any. But I had a bunch of Marines, and I had a bunch of people there that needed to know, so I jacked some Bibles. And every Sunday, we had Sunday service. Every Wednesday, we had midweek. Every night, we had first principle studies. While Scud missiles were in the air and Patriot missiles were meeting them, while we were receiving papers from people that had died on the front lines, people that were known in the camp, I was this no-name disciple, no Bible talk leader, no nothing, had no name, no-name disciple, being a disciple. While back at the States, the church was implementing its new philosophy. Someone had come on stage and had assassinated all the leaders. They were no longer standing for the principles that they had once stood for. The leaders on stage that had once motivated us to put God first had become cultural, political, not political, Republican, Democrat, but church political. They were personal, there was petty. And the practice was they were dismantling discipleship, and they were dismantling small groups, and they were dismantling the interactions with each other. And so the movement was no longer the movement, it was just a nameless group. Those that we once trusted on stage, we were trusting that these new directions that they were sending us, were new truths. And so it was kind of deceptive. Like it's not something that you catch on right away and say, wow, what's happening? But at some point you do go, what's happening? And then you come across Galatians chapter 1, verse 8. But even if we, or an angel in heaven, should preach a gospel other than the one that we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. Biblically, that's what that looks like. When your leaders start to compromise the gospel and you start to follow them. I know this preacher that was a real police officer. That was his career. He was a police officer. Recently, the country became very anti-cop. Now, that might hurt you if you were a cop and you're like, oh, that might hit you a little bit. But it doesn't hit you like when you're the leader of a flock and they all turn against you as well. I mean, what choice do you have? You have to leave. And that's what he did. Point 2, if you're a disciple, God is the cause and everything else is secondary. Lately, we have been mixing some worldly issues and some godly issues, but we need to die to the world. We need to die to the politics and all the emotions of that. We need to die to these social issues. At least put them in a distant second. The discipler who had walked me down the pier, he didn't live up to the promise of taking care of my family. That's what he had told me. He said he could sense my concern during my quiet time. He said, hey, don't worry, bro. I'm going to take care of your family. And he didn't. My family was unable to count on him because the church told him to stop being a discipler. I mean, really, think about it. The church said, stop being a discipler. And he listened. And so the question I'd have is, would you? In the Gospels, if you were there, and you came across the crowd and you witnessed them and they're yelling, crucify him, crucify him. And you have some spiritual leaders egging you to come on and join. Help us, yell, crucify him. Would that pressure get you to go there? It would. I'm not telling these stories to put myself up on some sort of pedestal, because I was there yelling, crucify him. Let's look at 1 Timothy 1:15. Here's a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptability. Jesus Christ, Yeshua, came into this world to save sinners, who I am the worst. That is how I feel. I am the worst. In all of this, like the church change stuff and people not doing what they're supposed to be doing, it was my conduct that put Christ on the cross. But he saved me, and I'm here to serve him. When I'd come back from my deployment, my family was in turmoil. I ended up getting a divorce. War is definitely a rough time. The church was a shell of what it used to be. I had a former discipler come up to me and tell me, hey, you should leave the church and things would get better with your family. Is that not Satan speaking through somebody? It truly was the lowest point in my life, mentally, spiritually, physically, my family, work, everything. But you want to know how God saved me? You know what road he put me on? It wasn't the road that I expected. It is the road that I just told you. He sent me away. He put me on the front lines of a physical war so that I could be a disciple and I could be shielded from the spiritual manipulation that was going on back at home, so that when I came back to the church, I didn't change my demeanor or my conduct, but I was a fish out of water the way I was acting compared to what everybody else was doing, right? God saved me by putting me on the front lines of a real war. And my new supporting cast were not the people sitting in the front, were not the people on stage. It was all the rejects in the back who were still trying to fight their sin and still trying to do what they needed to do. Those were the people that elevated and kept me faithful during the time. None of this looks like what we tend to think the church is. You know why God doesn't look at your heart? I'm sorry, let me say it again. Do you know why God does look at your heart? It's because your charisma cannot love him. Do you want to know if you're struggling with point two? Point two being if you're a disciple or God is the cause and everything else is secondary. You are struggling with point two if Jason Dimitri moving to LA is affecting you spiritually. You are struggling with point two if the Millers moving to San Francisco affected you spiritually. If anything to do with Kip McKean's career, not like his life, if it's affecting you, you're struggling with number two. Something else has become a little too important. Let me give you a truth. The organization that represents the governing body of the church can get political and it can get petty. If you want proof, just go back to the GLC and look at the communion. Point one, again, if you are a disciple long enough, you will be called up. You are being called up currently. The focus has to be God. The kingdom is bigger than a title that we attach to it sometimes. The kingdom is bigger than the title International Christian Church. Now, I love this church. My daughter married a Mexican who speaks Spanish, and they have a lot of Mexican events. And I like to tell her, I'm more Mexican than your boyfriend, or now your husband, right? I say that to say that that's how I feel about the thing about this church. If somebody was to accuse me of not loving this church, that would be false. I totally love this church. If you're a disciple, God is bigger than the cause and everything else is secondary. But here, come on, smart disciples, who's thinking Matthew 6:33? Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything that you need. Seek first the kingdom. And that is really my point. The kingdom is a body of people committed to God first, and everything else second. A people that seek God first. It's not a location. You guys already know that. It's not a building. We already know that. But it's also not a title. Luke 17:21, the kingdom is in your midst. Did I say it correctly? There you go. It's not political. It's not petty. It's not selfish. Obviously, today we've been sitting at the grown-ups table. I hope that you guys feel that way. I hope you feel like I'm looking at things through adult eyes. I'm not teaching new doctrine. Please don't accuse me of that. I am not. Let's look at the last point, and we'll take this in for a closing. It's been in the background the whole time. How are you going to live your Christianity? And I want to put an emphasis on the word live. To do, to act, to be about. How are you going to be a Christian? Let me ask you some trivia questions. Did our father Adonai, our father in the Old Testament, I'll put it that way, did he start Judaism? Did Yeshua in the New Testament, did he start Christianity? When you were you saved that you could reinforce religious conduct? He saved you so that you would be active, that you would be his hands, that you would be his feet in this world. He saved you so that you would live, that you would do, that you would be about, that you would not be aimless. Because you will be called up. I want to point something out that most of you probably don't know about the history of this church. The founders of this church did not want to start a church. That was not their goal. It was the last thing that they wanted. What they wanted to be was they just wanted to be believers. They just wanted to be Christians that met together. They didn't want a name attached to the group because they didn't want to be denominationalized. I don't know if that's a real word, but I hope you got it. They just wanted to be a people of God. Adonai in the Old Testament did not create Judaism. Yeshua in the Adonai in the Old Testament, Yeshua in the New Testament, did not start Christianity. They just wanted a people of God. A people who put God first. A people who understood the greatest commandment, to love him with all their heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love each other as the same. A people, not a religion. No one expected 9/11, and as an early disciple, I didn't expect that the movement would stop. I thought the kingdom was family, and they are, but you get hurt in family. I didn't expect my disciple best friends to shun me. I didn't expect my disciplers to leave me hanging. The point is, you cannot predict what is going to happen. And the broken road is not always going to be what you expect, but it will not be a fairy tale. Christianity cannot be a fairy tale. The broken road comes in God's timing. It is not what you want, but when you walk it, you will grow unlike any other time in your Christianity. When you lean and you turn and you trust God, the great news is you can kind of start that today. Like, I'm not wishing a broken road upon any of you, but you can start choosing God today so that when that happens, so that when that road does come, it'll be a habit that you can lean on. Amen? That's it. We're done. I'm going to call them up.